His father represented the family as the casket was opened in the gymnasium where Ben Wilson had struggled to become the nation's premier high school basketball player.
Ben Wilson knew how to stop the violence. He decided years ago not to get involved in gang activity. He instead became a winner.
I have a goal, and I want to be successful, and so I do what it takes to be successful. And that is, when I go home, I study and do my work and go to class.
Kind of corny stuff.
Well, it works.
A simple altercation can be a life or death situation. And for this star athlete, his fate was deadly. All of his hard work, his potential is gone with 2 shots. Channel, everyone. Courtney Elise here, aka Court Crimes TV. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and comment. Also, hit that notification bell, that way you'll know every time I upload. Let's get into the video. Benjamin Wilson Jr. was born March 18, 1967 in Chicago, Illinois, to parents Benjamin Wilson Sr. and Mary Wilson. He and his brothers would be raised on the south side of Chicago in the Chatham neighborhood. His love for the game of basketball would start at an early age while he was attending St. Dorothy's School and transferred to Ruggles Elementary. His neighborhood of Chatham would host summer league games and practices at Cole Park, to which Ben was always participating. Ben's skill for basketball came naturally, and his family quickly realized just how good he was. They realized Ben wasn't just your regular neighborhood hooper. He had serious talent. His family watched in amazement as they realized he had the potential to be one of the best players to ever come out of Chicago. Ben's family would start to really invest their time into him, and they would shield him from all potential negative influences. You see, he grew up on the south side of Chicago, where there was constant crime and violence, and it was also during the height of the crack epidemic. So they tried to protect him at all costs.
Ben Wilson knew how to stop the violence. He decided years ago not to get involved in gang activity. He instead became a winner.
I have a goal, and I want to be successful, and so I do what it takes to be successful. And that is, when I go home, I study and do my work and go to class.
Kind of corny stuff.
Well, it works.
Are you an athlete?
In the fall of 1981, Ben would begin his freshman year at Simeon Vocational High School. During the 1982-1983 season, Ben would be the only sophomore on the varsity team. During the 1983-1984 season, the Illinois AA State Championship would be held at the University of Illinois, and Ben would lead them to their first ever state championship after they defeated Evanston Township High School. ESPN would regard Ben as the best junior in the country. His coach, Bob Hambrick, described him as Magic Johnson with a jump shot. People were in awe watching him play. In July of 1984, Ben would be invited to the Athletes for Better Education camp in Princeton, New Jersey. This was an invite only for the top high schools in the nation. And after a week long of hard competition, he would be named the #1 player in the country. He was also rumored to be considering scholarship offers to Indiana University, DePaul University, and the University of Illinois. What college do y'all think he would have picked had everything gone right? November 20th, 1984 started off like any other regular day at Simeon High School. But by lunchtime, Simeon High School students' lives would be changed forever. That day for lunch, Ben would decide to go with his girlfriend / mother of his child instead of having lunch with his teammates that day. Ben and the mother of his child, Jetun Rush, had a baby that was 10 weeks old at the time. Now it's said that Ben and Jetun had been having relationship issues, and they decided to talk things through during lunch that day. While they were talking, a Calumet High School student by the name of Billy Moore was outside of of Simeon High School with a .22 caliber revolver looking for revenge. Billy's cousin was allegedly robbed of $10 by a student from Simeon, but somehow, some way, Billy would find out that the conflict was resolved, and instead of leaving, he and another friend by the name of Omar Dixon decided to stick around. In my opinion, they both were out looking for trouble. Billy was itching to pull that trigger that day. He couldn't get his initial target, so he just waited around in case something happened. Eventually, the two would decide to leave and follow Billy's friend, Erica Murphy, up the street to a restaurant. Now, what I'm about to say is Billy's version of events. He said he and Omar were standing outside of a restaurant when Ben and his girlfriend came up behind them. Billy said Ben and his girlfriend were kind of arguing, and Ben's girlfriend was trying to walk away from Ben. Well, Ben was trying to follow behind Jetun, and when he was following behind, Billy said Ben bumped into him. Billy, I'm assuming with an attitude, told Ben to watch where he was going. Billy said Ben then turned around and walked towards him. The two of them, Ben and Billy, would end up getting into a heated verbal exchange, leading to Billy pulling out his .22 caliber revolver. This is when Billy said Ben started to taunt and mock him, pretty much daring him to it, which I don't believe, but I'll get into that later on in this video. Billy said to him it felt like Ben was trying to punk him.
All of a sudden, I just get shoved out of the way, and it was with a lot of force. He kept walking. Him and his girlfriend, they were arguing, so I said, hey man, ain't you gonna say excuse me? And he stopped and turned around. He said, man, you, I don't owe you no excuse. Who is you? I'm like, nah, you. And she and this is when I hear his name. Come on, Ben, let's go, Ben. And she grabbed him. I say, man, don't walk up on me. If I do, then what? If I walk up, now what? And he he just straight punking me now.
He said Ben then lunged at him, and this is when Billy would shoot Ben twice. Once in the groin, and the second bullet struck him in his abdomen, which caused significant internal bleeding. After Ben, Billy, and Omar would both flee the scene.
So I stepped back and unzipped my jacket. So I'm figuring, he see this gun, he gonna leave, and his girlfriend just goes hysterical when she see the gun, And he oh, you got a gun? What you gonna do, shoot me now? I take 2 steps backwards, and he lunges towards me. I pulls the gun out and shot him twice.
Within minutes, word got back to Simeon about the shooting, and a crowd would form around Ben.
Finally sat down, and then he just dropped his head. I turned to look, and everybody was coming from the school. The whole school was running towards that place.
His condition was getting worse as the seconds passed by. This is when his coach, Bob Hambrick, made the decision to take Ben to the hospital himself because the ambulance was taking way too long. Just as he was about to pull off, the ambulance would finally show up. Ben would be rushed to the closest hospital, which would be St. John's Hospital. Meanwhile, at Simeon, the students were distraught. The basketball team would be placed in the teacher's lounge for the rest of the day. I'm assuming they put the whole team in there because the next day was the season opener, and I'm assuming they just didn't want anything else happening to the rest of the team. Their star player just got so they wanted to isolate the team and keep them away from as much drama as possible. Ben's teammate recollects just how tense the environment was right afterwards. He said that throughout the night, the reports progressively got worse, going from Ben possibly recovering just in time for the playoffs to perhaps maybe missing a year of play, to possibly never playing again, and to him fighting for his life. I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive, it was a nerve-wracking experience for everyone. Everyone was worried about Ben. Meanwhile, later on that same night, Billy would be at Erica Murphy's house watching TV as if nothing happened. He said while looking at the television, because this is all over the news, this is when he found out who it was he actually shot, which I believe is a lie, because Ben was known to everyone. Ben was not just some 5'9" basketball player. Okay, Ben was a 6'8" junior in high school. The entire country knew who he was. It's like nowadays when like LaMelo Ball was in high school or Cade Cunningham was in high school. Everyone knew who he was. He was the #1 player in the entire country. I don't believe Billy didn't know who Ben was. Back to the story. Billy would be arrested while at Erica's home, and Omar's arrest would come quickly after.
Then seeing the two guys who did it and the lies.
Did you know Ben Wilson? You know him?
After the shooting, cousins Billy Moore and Omar Dixon were taken into custody, charged with murder and attempted robbery.
At the hospital, Ben's family and loved ones would gather.
He waited for surgery as a huge crowd gathered at the hospital. Benji lost 4 pints of blood.
Ben's brother, Curtis Glenn, recounted in the ESPN documentary about seeing his brother being wheeled by him in the hospital. He noticed that Ben's feet were unnaturally pale. Upon further examination, it was discovered that his aorta was damaged by the second and there was no blood reaching his lower extremities. Even if they were to repair the damage, Ben would have probably been in a persistent vegetative state due to the massive amount of blood he lost. Despite Ben's condition, doctors tried to remain optimistic about his fate, and they constantly reassured Ben's mother that they could save him. But Ben's mother had experience as a nurse, and although she appreciated the doctor's efforts in trying to save her son, she knew that there was nothing they could do. And on November 21st, 1984, Ben's mother would ask for his life support to be turned off. Benjamin Benji Wilson was just 17 years old. The news of his death was heartbreaking. Simeon's basketball team had to play the season opener that day. They would have a moment of silence in his honor for 1 minute, and there was not a dry eye in that entire auditorium. His high school teammate Nick Anderson said it was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was heartbroken.
On the day that Benji died, his Simeon teammates decided to play their first game of the season without number 25.
Ben's Simeon High School teammates are indeed preparing for a basketball game.
Benji Wilson's teammates are behind me watching the warm-up for the second game of the evening.
All the rise for 1 minute of silence in honor of Simeon basketball star, Mr. Ben Wilson.
And you could hear a pin drop, and I can raise my head up. You could see people crying and, you know, tears rolling down their eyes.
The team would push through their emotions and they would win their season opener. At Simeon, the students were grieving hard, and his mother would speak to the students in the auditorium. For Ben's wake, his casket would be open and he would be dressed in his number 25 Simeon High School basketball jersey. The line to view him stretched for blocks outside of the school. The mayor even attended and refused security escort to view him privately.
To be with my Lord.
Earlier in the day, students sobbed at Simeon, simply overwhelmed with grief. But Benji's mother stood tall in the gymnasium.
So today I ask the support and love of all of you to keep Benji's memory of dignity, strength, and love alive.
The wake was held on the gymnasium floor, and 8,000 people came to see Benji lying in his number 25 jersey. The line stretched blocks outside of the school. Mourners waited 7 hours.
Reverend Jesse Jackson would have Ben's family over for Thanksgiving that year, and they would begin to plan his funeral. His funeral was held at the headquarters of Reverend Jesse Jackson's Operation Rainbow Push.
The mother of slain basketball star Ben Wilson spent this morning at the Reverend Jesse Jackson's house, going over funeral arrangements for her son with Operation Push's executive director, Reverend Willie Barrow. The funeral will be held Saturday at Operation Push, where thousands are expected to attend.
People waited hours just to get in to his funeral. Over 10,000 people would attend. This kid was loved. So many people were just heartbroken over his death. People wanted to see Ben make it out. And just to see him in a casket, it really hurt people. To see such a wonderful person, an extremely talented young boy, be taken away.
Standing beside Ben's father was 16-year-old Tony Jones, almost a brother to Ben, who became close to the superstar years ago through basketball.
I'm just trying to help the family and do whatever I can right now and be a brother to the two younger brothers, Jeff and Anthony. And I feel that I can, hold on that role until they can understand what has happened.
Can you understand?
I don't see how anybody could understand why two young men would take another man's life who seems to be trying so hard to succeed in this world that we live in now.
Ben would be laid to rest at Oakwood Cemetery. Back to Billy and Omar. The police presented both of them with a case theory that after Billy's conflict with Ben, Omar tried to pick the pockets of Ben and then urged Billy to him. Both of the boys would sign confessions, but they later recanted them. Despite them both being underage at the time, the Cook County Attorney's Office elected to try them both as adults. The trial began in the fall of 1985. State attorneys Kenneth Malatesta, sorry if I mispronounced that, and Arthur Hill presided over the prosecution and presented the police's theory, which was about the robbery. Jetun Rush, the mother of Ben's baby, was the lead witness, and she testified to that effect. Both Billy and Omar's attorneys tried to testify, saying that the two of them were only charged because of Ben's celebrity, as if to say, if Ben wasn't who he was, no one would care that he was killed, which is a ridiculous thing to say. They would both be convicted of murder and attempted armed robbery. Billy received a 40-year sentence while Omar received a 30-year sentence. He only received a 30-year sentence because even though he was there, he wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. It was Billy's doing that pulled the trigger and did the fatal shot. So Omar got off 10 years.
Billy Moore and Omar Dixon were taken into custody, charged with murder and attempted robbery. Moore was later sentenced to 40 years for pulling the trigger, and Dixon 30 years as his accomplice.
Ben's family lawsuit against the hospital for inappropriate delay of medical care was settled in 1992 for an undisclosed amount. Omar Dixon would be released on parole in 2000, but was later re-arrested for another armed robbery, so he clearly didn't learn his lesson. Billy would be released in 2005. Now, Ben's only son, Brandon Sherrod Wilson, would go on to play basketball at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. After college basketball was over, he would attend and graduate from the Nazoo Police Academy. He served 5 years in the Port Washington Police Department, but unfortunately, on January 13th, 2022, Brandon would swerve into a shoulder on the Northern State Parkway and hit a pole and 2 trees. He would unfortunately pass away. My opinions on this: I don't believe Billy's version of events. I don't believe he didn't know who Ben was. Like I said before, Ben was known to everyone. It's not like Ben was just known in the neighborhood of Chatham. Ben was known nationwide. Ben was a 6'8" senior. It's not too many of those running around here. Everyone knew who Ben was. So that story of him not knowing who Ben was, I feel is a lie. Also, he said Ben lunged at him. Again, Ben was a star. Ben knew he had a lot going for him. Why would he throw all of that away and taunt someone with a gun? Why would he dare someone with a gun to shoot him? I feel Billy made that story up to try to justify his actions, because it just doesn't make any sense. But rest in peace to Ben, and rest in peace to Brandon.